Marcus Williams adjusted his crisp Navy uniform one more time as he stood outside the grand entrance of the Meridian Tower, one of Manhattan's most exclusive residential buildings. The golden buttons gleamed under the afternoon sun, and his polished shoes reflected the marble floor beneath his feet. At 28, Marcus had been working as a doorman for 3 years, and he took pride in his job, no matter how some people looked at him. The building housed some of New York's wealthiest residents, investment bankers, celebrities, tech entrepreneurs, and old money families who had lived there for generations. Marcus knew each tenant by name, their preferences, their schedules, and their quirks. Mrs. Henderson in 4B always needed help with her groceries. Mr. Chen from the penthouse liked his newspaper folded in a specific way. The Johnson family's twin boys would run to hug Marcus whenever they saw him, much to their nanny's embarrassment. But not everyone appreciated Marcus's dedication to his work. Some residents barely acknowledged his existence, walking past him as if he were invisible. Others made snide comments about his kind when they thought he couldn't hear. Marcus had learned to keep his head high and his smile professional, even when his heart felt heavy. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was helping elderly Mrs. Rosenberg with her shopping bags when a sleek black BMW pulled up to the curb. The car looked expensive with its gleaming paint and chrome details. Marcus had seen this car before. It belonged to Richard Blackstone, a new resident who had moved into the building just 2 months ago. Blackstone was a real estate developer who had made his fortune buying and selling properties across the city. From the first day Blackstone moved in, Marcus could sense the man's disdain. The way Blackstone's eyes would narrow when he saw Marcus, the way he would hand over his keys without making eye contact, the dismissive tone he used when speaking to him. It was nothing new to Marcus, but something about Blackstone felt different, more hostile, more dangerous. As Mrs. Rosenberg thanked Marcus and walked toward the elevator, Blackstone stepped out of his BMW. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair slicked back and an expensive suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. His face wore a permanent scowl, and his small, dark eyes seemed to be constantly judging everyone around him. "You," Blackstone called out, not bothering to use Marcus's name despite the gold nameplate clearly visible on his uniform. "My car. Better not have a single scratch on it when I get back. I'm watching you." Marcus nodded politely. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone. I'll take good care of it." Blackstone tossed the keys in Marcus's direction, forcing him to catch them awkwardly. "You better. I know exactly what you people are like. Always looking for an opportunity to steal something or cause trouble. I've got my eye on you." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut, but he maintained his professional composure. "I understand, sir. Your car will be safe with me." As Blackstone disappeared into the building, Marcus felt the familiar sting of discrimination. He had grown up in Brooklyn, raised by his grandmother after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. His grandmother, a retired school teacher named Dorothy Williams, had instilled in him the values of hard work, dignity, and education. She had worked 2 jobs to put him through school and always told him that no matter how people treated him, he should never let it diminish his own worth. Marcus parked Blackstone's BMW in the designated spot and returned to his post. The rest of his shift passed quietly, with the usual flow of residents coming and going. He helped carry packages, called taxis, accepted deliveries, and maintained the friendly, professional demeanor that had made him popular with most of the building's occupants. As evening approached, Marcus began to notice something troubling. Blackstone had been making phone calls in the lobby, speaking loudly enough for Marcus to overhear fragments of conversation. The man was clearly agitated about something, pacing back and forth while barking orders into his phone about dealing with problems and making sure certain people knew their place. When Blackstone finally approached to collect his car keys, his mood seemed even darker than usual. "I hope you didn't go through my car," he said, snatching the keys from Marcus's outstretched hand. "I'll know if you did. I have cameras everywhere." Marcus shook his head calmly. "No, sir. I would never do that. Your vehicle hasn't been touched except to park it safely." Blackstone leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Good. Because if I find out you've been snooping around or touching things you shouldn't touch, there will be consequences. I have connections in this city. I can make problems for people like you disappear, if you know what I mean." The threat was clear, but Marcus refused to be intimidated. "I understand, Mr. Blackstone. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Blackstone's eyes flashed with anger at Marcus's calm response. "Don't get smart with me, boy. I know. Your type. You think you're better than what you are, but you're just another doorman. Remember that." As Blackstone drove away, Marcus stood alone on the sidewalk, processing what had just happened. The man's hostility was escalating, and Marcus could sense that this was just the beginning. He had dealt with prejudice before, but something about Richard Blackstone felt particularly dangerous. What Blackstone didn't know, what none of the residents knew, was that Marcus Williams was not just a doorman. His life had a complexity and depth that went far beyond what anyone could see from his uniform and his position at the building's entrance. He had secrets, connections, and a past that would surprise everyone who thought they had him figured out. As Marcus finished his shift and prepared to head home to his modest apartment in Queens, he couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Blackstone was going to lead somewhere dark. The man's threats had been specific and personal, suggesting that this wasn't just casual racism, but something more calculated and dangerous. Little did Marcus know that within days, Blackstone would make a move that would not only reveal the true extent of his prejudice, but would also force Marcus to reveal aspects of his own identity that he had kept hidden for years. The confrontation that was brewing would change both their lives forever, in ways neither man could imagine. 3 days after his confrontation with Blackstone, Marcus arrived at work to find the building manager, Patricia Holmes, waiting for him in the lobby. Patricia was a stern but fair woman in her 40s, who had always treated Marcus with respect and professionalism. Her expression this morning, however, was troubled and serious. "Marcus, I need to speak with you privately," she said, gesturing toward her office behind the front desk. As they walked into the small, cluttered office filled with filing cabinets and building maintenance schedules, Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach. Patricia closed the door and sat down behind her desk, her fingers drumming nervously on the surface. "I received a complaint about you yesterday evening," she began, her voice careful and measured. "Mr. Blackstone from 12A has accused you of going through his car while it was parked. He claims some personal items were moved around and that he has reason to believe you were searching through his belongings." Marcus felt his heart sink. He had been expecting something like this, but it still hit him hard. "Patricia, I swear to you, I never touched anything in that car except the steering wheel and gear shift when I parked it. I would never violate a resident's privacy like that." Patricia held up her hand. "I believe you, Marcus. In 3 years, you've never given me any reason to doubt your integrity. But Mr. Blackstone is demanding action. He wants you suspended pending a full investigation." The unfairness of the situation burned in Marcus's chest. "He's lying. This is about the color of my skin, Patricia. You know it, and I know it. From day one, he's treated me like I'm some kind of criminal just waiting for an opportunity to steal from him." "I understand your frustration," Patricia said, her voice softening. "And between you and me, I've had concerns about Mr. Blackstone's attitude towards several of our staff members. But my hands are tied. He's threatening to go to the building's board of directors and make this a much bigger issue if I don't take his complaint seriously." Marcus sank into the chair across from her desk. He thought about his grandmother, Dorothy, now in her 70s and living in a nursing home in Brooklyn. Her medical expenses were significant, and Marcus's salary as a doorman helped supplement her care. He couldn't afford to lose this job, especially not over false accusations. "What do you need me to do?" he asked quietly. "I'm going to conduct a formal investigation. I'll review the security footage from the garage, interview other staff members who were working that day, and document everything properly. If I can prove these accusations are baseless, which I believe they are, then Mr. Blackstone will have to back down or face consequences for filing false complaints." That afternoon, while Patricia began her investigation, Marcus went about his duties with a heavy heart. Several residents noticed his subdued mood and asked if everything was okay. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from 4B, even brought him a cup of coffee and a homemade cookie, sensing something was troubling him. "You're a good man, Marcus," she said, patting his shoulder gently. "Whatever's bothering you, remember that the people who matter can see your true character." Her words meant more to Marcus than she could know. But as the day progressed, he noticed that Blackstone seemed to be making a point of being visible, in the lobby more often than usual. The man would stand near the elevator, talking loudly on his phone about security issues and the importance of proper background checks for building staff. By evening, word of the accusations had somehow spread among some of the residents. Marcus could see it in the way certain people looked at him, with suspicion and doubt that hadn't been there before. It was exactly what Blackstone had intended, Marcus realized. Even if the investigation proved Marcus's innocence, the seed of doubt had been planted. As Marcus was preparing to end his shift, Blackstone emerged from the elevator with two other men Marcus didn't recognize. They were dressed in expensive suits and had the hard, calculating look of business associates. Blackstone made a show of pointing in Marcus's direction and speaking in hushed tones to his companions. "That's him," Marcus heard Blackstone say. "I told you we have security issues in this building. Management doesn't take these things seriously enough." One of Blackstone's companions, a heavy-set man with cold eyes, looked Marcus up and down with obvious disdain. "I can see what you mean, Richard. Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands." The implied threat in those words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. This was escalating beyond a simple complaint about car searching. Blackstone was building something bigger, more dangerous. That night, Marcus went home to his small apartment and sat at his kitchen table staring at a framed photograph of his grandmother Dorothy from her younger days. She was wearing her teaching clothes, surrounded by a classroom full of smiling children. Next to it was another photograph, one that very few people had ever seen. It showed Marcus in a military dress uniform, his chest decorated with medals, shaking hands with a high-ranking government official. Marcus had served 2 tours of duty overseas as part of an elite intelligence unit. His work had involved deep cover operations, languages, and cultural integration, skills that had served him well in civilian life, even as a doorman. Few people knew about his military background because he had learned that it sometimes made people uncomfortable or changed how they treated him in ways he didn't always appreciate. But there were other aspects of his background that were even more significant. Connections and experiences that went far beyond his military service. Marcus had been recruited for special assignments, had worked with federal agencies, and had skills and knowledge that would surprise anyone who thought they knew him. As he prepared for bed, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in over a year, but he recognized it immediately. "Williams," he answered. "Marcus, it's Agent Sarah Chen from the Bureau. We need to talk." The Federal Bureau of Investigation contact was unexpected but not entirely surprising. Marcus had maintained his security clearance even after leaving active duty, and he occasionally received calls for consultation on cases that required his particular expertise. "What's this about, Sarah?" "Richard Blackstone. We've been watching him for 6 months as part of a broader investigation into money laundering and real estate fraud. We understand you work in his building." Marcus felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to click into place. "He's been targeting me with false accusations. I think he suspects something. That's what we're afraid of. We need to meet tomorrow. There are things about this situation you need to know, and there may be ways you can help us. But Marcus, you need to be very careful. Blackstone is more dangerous than you realize, and if he thinks you're a threat to his operations, he won't hesitate to eliminate that threat." As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that his confrontation with Blackstone had taken on dimensions far beyond simple workplace racism. He was now potentially in the middle of a federal investigation, and his cover as just another doorman was about to become much more complicated to maintain. Marcus met Agent Sarah Chen the next morning at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan, and the watchful eyes of anyone who might recognize him. Sarah was a petite Asian-American woman in her 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority. She had worked with Marcus 2 years earlier on a case involving international arms trafficking, and they had developed a mutual respect and trust. "You look good in civilian clothes," Sarah said with a slight smile as Marcus sat down across from her. "The doorman uniform suits you, but I remember when you were running operations in 3 different languages." Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "Those days feel like a lifetime ago. What's Blackstone really involved in?" Sarah opened a tablet and showed Marcus a series of photographs and documents. Richard Blackstone has been using his real estate development company as a front for one of the largest money laundering operations we've seen in New York. He's been taking dirty money from criminal organizations, drug cartels, arms dealers, human traffickers, and cleaning it through property purchases and developments. The photographs showed Blackstone meeting with various individuals in expensive restaurants and private offices. Some of the faces Marcus recognized from news reports about organized crime figures. Others were unfamiliar but had the unmistakable look of dangerous people. "The Meridian Tower where you work," Sarah continued, "was purchased by one of Blackstone's shell companies using money we believe came from a Mexican drug cartel. He's been using the building as a base of operations, and we think he's storing documents and conducting meetings there." Marcus felt a chill as he realized how close he had been to serious criminal activity every day for the past 2 months. "Why haven't you arrested him yet?" "We need more evidence to make charges stick. Blackstone is smart. He's insulated himself, with layers of legitimate businesses and legal protection. We've been building a case slowly, but we need someone on the inside who can observe his activities and potentially gather evidence." The implication was clear, and Marcus shook his head. "Sarah, I'm not an active agent anymore. I'm just a doorman, trying to make an honest living and take care of my grandmother. Marcus, he's already targeting you. Yesterday, Blackstone made several phone calls that our surveillance picked up. He's convinced you're some kind of undercover law enforcement, and he's planning to do something about it." Sarah showed Marcus a transcript of a phone conversation from the previous evening. Blackstone's words were chilling. "I don't care what it costs. This guy is a problem, and problems need to be eliminated. Make it look like an accident. Maybe a mugging gone wrong or something in his neighborhood." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "He's planning to have me killed?" "We believe so, which means your cover as just a doorman is already blown whether you help us or not. The question is whether you want to be a sitting duck, or whether you want to take some control of the situation." For the next hour, Sarah laid out the scope of Blackstone's criminal enterprise. The man had been operating for over 5 years, laundering hundreds of millions of dollars through real estate transactions across New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. He had connections to corrupt politicians, dirty cops, and violent criminal organizations that wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who threatened their operations. If we can get solid evidence of his activities inside the Meridian Tower, we can bring down not just Blackstone but an entire network of criminals who've been using his services," Sarah explained. "You're in a unique position to help us do that." Marcus thought about his grandmother Dorothy, about the innocent residents of the building who had no idea they were living above a criminal operation, and about the young doormen and building staff who might become targets if Blackstone felt threatened. "What would you need me to do?" Sarah outlined a plan that would allow Marcus to maintain his cover as a doorman while conducting careful surveillance of Blackstone's activities. They would provide him with hidden recording devices and a secure communication system. His job would be to document meetings, photograph documents when possible, and identify the other criminal associates who were using the building. "The most important thing is that you stay alive," Sarah emphasized. "Blackstone is already suspicious of you, so you'll need to be extremely careful. We'll have backup teams positioned around the building, but if you're discovered, things could get very dangerous very quickly." That afternoon, Marcus returned to work with a new sense of purpose and a heightened awareness of the danger surrounding him. Patricia Holmes approached him as soon as he arrived, her face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "I have good news and bad news," she said. "The good news is that I reviewed all the security footage from the garage on the day Blackstone claims you went through his car. The cameras clearly show that you never opened any doors or spent more than 30 seconds with the vehicle. His accusations are completely false." Marcus felt a moment of relief, but Patricia's expression suggested the bad news was significant. "The bad news is that Mr. Blackstone is refusing to accept my findings. He's demanding that the building's board of directors review the matter, and he's threatening to sue the building management company if you're not terminated immediately." Before Marcus could respond, the elevator doors opened and Blackstone stepped out, accompanied by the same two men Marcus had seen with him the previous day. This time, however, there was a third man, younger, with the lean build and alert eyes of someone accustomed to violence. Blackstone approached the front desk where Marcus and Patricia were standing. His expression was cold and confident, like a man who believed he held all the cards in a high-stakes game. "Ms. Holmes," he said, ignoring Marcus completely, "I trust you've made the right decision regarding the security issue." Patricia straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Blackstone, I've completed my investigation, and I found no evidence to support your accusations. The security footage clearly shows that Marcus never violated your vehicle's interior." Blackstone's face darkened. "Then your investigation was inadequate. I know what I know, and I know this man cannot be trusted. If you won't take appropriate action, I'll be forced to take this matter to higher authorities." The younger man with Blackstone stepped forward slightly, his hand moving to rest inside his jacket. It was a subtle but unmistakable gesture of intimidation. Marcus recognized the move immediately from his military training. This man was armed and prepared to use violence if necessary. The situation was escalating beyond a simple workplace dispute into something much more dangerous. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said calmly, his own training kicking in. "I'm just trying to do my job and serve all the residents of this building to the best of my ability." Blackstone turned to look at Marcus for the first time. His eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and suspicion. "I don't think you understand what your job really is, boy. Maybe it's time someone explained it to you more clearly." The threat was unmistakable, and Marcus realized that his conversation with Agent Chen had been perfectly timed. Blackstone was indeed planning something, and it was going to happen soon. The only question now was whether Marcus would be ready for whatever was coming next. That evening, Marcus stayed late at the building, using his access to review security protocols and familiarize himself with areas he hadn't paid attention to before. The basement parking garage had blind spots that could be useful, and he noted the locations of emergency exits and communication equipment that Agent Chen had mentioned. As he was preparing to leave around 10 p.m., much later than his usual shift, Marcus heard voices coming from the penthouse elevator. The building's elevator system was old enough that sounds carried through the shaft, and he could make out Blackstone's voice along with several others speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Moving carefully to position himself where he could hear better, Marcus caught fragments of conversation that made his blood run cold. Words like shipment, payment, and cleanup drifted down from above. Someone mentioned the doorman problem and making it permanent. Marcus quickly activated the small recording device that Agent Chen had provided him. It looked like an ordinary pen clipped to his uniform pocket, but it could capture conversations from surprisingly long distances. 20 minutes later, the elevator descended, and Marcus positioned himself at the front desk as if he were finishing routine paperwork. Blackstone emerged with 4 men Marcus hadn't seen before. These weren't the business associates from earlier. These men had the hard, dangerous look of professional criminals. "Remember," Blackstone was saying as they walked toward the exit, "tomorrow night after the building quiets down, make it clean, make it look random, and make sure there are no loose ends." One of the men, a tall figure with scarred hands and dead eyes, nodded. "The doorman won't be a problem after tomorrow. Neither will anyone else who might have seen too much." As they left the building, Marcus realized that his time was running out. Whatever Blackstone was planning for tomorrow night, it involved eliminating Marcus and possibly other witnesses to his criminal activities. He immediately sent a coded text message to Agent Chen, using the communication protocol they had established. Within minutes, his phone vibrated with a response. "Meet at the usual place in 1 hour. Come alone and watch for surveillance." The coffee shop in Brooklyn was nearly empty when Marcus arrived. Sarah was already there, along with another agent Marcus didn't recognize, a tall black man in his 40s with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "Marcus, this is Agent David Thompson, my supervisor," Sarah said. "We intercepted some communications tonight that suggest the situation has become critical. Agent Thompson leaned forward, his expression grave. "We have intelligence that Blackstone is planning to eliminate you tomorrow night, but that's not the worst of it. He's also planning to destroy evidence stored in the building, which means he might be preparing to abandon his operation here. If he runs," Sarah added, "we lose our chance to capture not just him but his entire network. We're talking about criminals responsible for millions of dollars in drug money, human trafficking operations, and at least a dozen murders." Marcus absorbed this information. "What do you need me to do?" Thompson pulled out a detailed floor plan of the Meridian Tower. "We believe Blackstone is storing critical documents and computer files in a secure room somewhere in the building. Tomorrow night, while his people are focused on eliminating you, we need you to locate that room and gather as much evidence as possible." "You're asking me to risk my life on a maybe," Marcus said. "What if you're wrong about the location? What if his security is better than you think?" "We're not wrong," Sarah replied, showing him surveillance photographs. "For the past week, we've documented Blackstone making regular trips to the building's sub-basement level, always carrying briefcases or computer equipment. There's something down there he considers very important." Thompson outlined the plan in detail. FBI agents would be positioned around the building, ready to move in if Marcus signaled for help. They would also be monitoring Blackstone's communications and tracking his associates. Marcus's job was to access the sub-basement, locate the evidence, and document everything before Blackstone's people could destroy it. "There's one more thing," Thompson said, his voice becoming more serious. "If this goes wrong, if you're captured or killed, we may never get another opportunity to stop these people. The stakes are higher than just your personal safety." Marcus thought about his grandmother Dorothy, about the residents of the building who trusted him to keep them safe, and about all the future victims of Blackstone's criminal network if they were allowed to continue operating. "I'll do it," he said finally. "But I need you to promise me something. If this goes bad, if I don't make it out, make sure my grandmother is taken care of, and make sure the truth about what happened gets told." The next day passed with excruciating slowness. Marcus went through his normal routine, greeting residents, handling packages, and maintaining his professional demeanor, all while knowing that trained killers were planning to murder him before midnight. Several residents noticed that Marcus seemed different, more alert, more focused. Mrs. Henderson commented that he looked like a soldier preparing for battle, which was closer to the truth than she realized. Around 8 p.m., Patricia Holmes left for the day, reminding Marcus that he would be the only staff member in the building overnight. The night security guard wouldn't arrive until 11 p.m., giving Marcus a narrow window to access the sub-basement. At 9:30, Marcus used his master key to access the elevator control panel and override the system to take him to the sub-basement level. The building's blueprints showed this area as storage and mechanical rooms, but as Marcus stepped out of the elevator, he could see that significant modifications had been made. The hallway was better lit than the blueprint suggested, and Marcus could hear the hum of computer equipment coming from behind a reinforced steel door at the end of the corridor. Electronic locks and security cameras had been installed, indicating that whatever was behind that door was extremely valuable to Blackstone. Using tools that Agent Chen had provided, Marcus carefully disabled the security camera and began working on the electronic lock. His military training in infiltration and electronics served him well, and within 10 minutes, he heard the satisfying click of the lock disengaging. Inside the room, Marcus found exactly what the FBI had hoped to discover. Banks of computer servers lined one wall, while filing cabinets filled with documents occupied another. A large table in the center of the room was covered with financial records, property deeds, and what appeared to be shipping manifests for illegal cargo. Marcus began photographing everything with a high-resolution camera disguised as a smartphone, page after page of evidence documenting Blackstone's money laundering operation, his connections to criminal organizations, and detailed records of illegal transactions going back 5 years. As he worked, Marcus became aware of voices coming from the elevator shaft. Blackstone had returned to the building, and he wasn't alone. From the sound of footsteps and muffled conversation, at least 3 people were with him. Marcus quickly gathered as much physical evidence as he could carry and prepared to leave the room. But as he reached for the door handle, he heard the elevator arriving at the sub-basement level. He was trapped, with nowhere to run and potentially deadly consequences if he was discovered. The confrontation that had been building for weeks was about to reach its explosive conclusion, and Marcus realized that his survival would depend on skills he had hoped never to use again in civilian life. Marcus quickly scanned the room for options. There was no other exit, no windows, and nowhere to hide that would conceal him for more than a few seconds. The voices in the hallway were getting closer, and he could hear Blackstone directing his associates to check the security systems. Making a split-second decision, Marcus positioned himself behind the door and activated the emergency signal that would alert Agent Chen and the FBI backup team. But he knew that even if they responded immediately, it would take several minutes for them to reach the sub-basement. The door opened, and Blackstone stepped into the room, followed by 3 men Marcus recognized from earlier encounters. The tall man with scarred hands, the heavy-set business associate, and a new figure, a woman with short blonde hair and cold, calculating eyes. "Everything looks normal," Blackstone was saying as he moved toward the computer servers. "But I want a full security sweep anyway. If that doorman has been snooping around, I want to know about it." Marcus held his breath, pressed against the wall behind the open door. From his position, he could see the woman examining the filing cabinets while the 2 men checked the computer equipment. "Richard," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't place. "Some of these documents have been moved. Someone has definitely been in here." Blackstone spun around, his face darkening with rage. "Find him, now." The scarred man drew a pistol from inside his jacket and began systematically searching the room. Marcus knew he had seconds before he would be discovered. Drawing on his military training, he waited until the searcher's back was turned, then moved swiftly and silently. In one fluid motion, Marcus stepped out from behind the door, disarmed the scarred man, and used him as a human shield while pointing the captured weapon at Blackstone. "Nobody move," Marcus said, his voice calm and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Everyone stay exactly where you are." Blackstone's eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and fury. "I knew it. I knew you weren't just some doorman. What are you, FBI? DEA? Some kind of undercover cop?" "I'm someone who's tired of watching." "You destroy people's lives," Marcus replied, keeping the gun trained on the group while mentally calculating distances and escape routes. "I know about the money laundering, the criminal connections, the plans to kill anyone who gets in your way." The blonde woman laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, little man. Richard might be afraid of you, but I'm not. Do you know who I am?" Marcus kept his focus on Blackstone, who was clearly the most dangerous person in the room despite not being armed. "I know you're all going to prison for a very long time. My name is Katarina Volkov," the woman continued, moving slightly to her left. "I represent certain interests from Eastern Europe, interests that don't tolerate interference in their business operations." Marcus had heard that name before, during intelligence briefings years ago. Katarina Volkov was suspected of running human trafficking operations from Russia into the United States. If she was here, it meant Blackstone's criminal network was even larger and more dangerous than the FBI had realized. "Richard has been very useful to us," Volkov continued, "helping clean money from our various enterprises. But he's become sloppy, attracted attention. Perhaps it's time for new management." Blackstone turned toward her, confusion replacing his anger. "Katarina, what are you talking about? We had a deal." "Deals change," she replied coldly. Then, moving faster than Marcus expected, she produced a small pistol from her purse and shot Blackstone twice in the chest. The real estate developer collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across his expensive shirt. His eyes remained open, staring at Marcus with an expression of shock and betrayal. "Now then," Volkov said, turning the gun toward Marcus. "You've seen too much, and you know too much. But before you die, tell me, who are you really?" Marcus realized that his situation had become exponentially more dangerous. Blackstone had been a criminal, but Volkov was a professional killer who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened. Her operations, "My name is Marcus Williams," he said honestly. "And you're right, I'm not just a doorman." Before Volkov could respond, the lights in the room suddenly went out, plunging them into complete darkness. Marcus had been counting in his head since activating the emergency signal, and he knew that Agent Chen and the backup team had finally arrived. In the darkness, Marcus heard the sound of the heavy-set man trying to move toward him, but years of night combat training served him well. He dropped to the floor, rolled behind the table in the center of the room, and waited for his eyes to adjust to the blackness. The emergency lighting system kicked in, bathing the room in a dim red glow. Marcus could see Volkov crouched behind one of the filing cabinets, her gun trained on the area where he had been standing. The heavy-set man was moving along the wall, trying to get a clear shot, while the disarmed man remained on the floor where Marcus had left him. "You think your backup team can save you?" Volkov called out. "I've been killing people longer than you've been alive, boy. This room will be your tomb." Marcus heard footsteps in the hallway outside, along with shouted commands in English and what sounded like tactical communications. The FBI had arrived, but the reinforced door would slow them down. "FBI, federal agents." Agent Chen's voice echoed from the hallway. Volkov's expression hardened when she heard the FBI announcement. "You led them right to us," she hissed at Marcus. "But it doesn't matter. We'll kill you and find another way out." The sound of heavy equipment being used on the reinforced door echoed through the room. Marcus knew the FBI would break through eventually, but Volkov and her remaining associates still had time to eliminate him and possibly escape through whatever backup plan they had prepared. "There's nowhere to run," Marcus called out from behind the table. "The building is surrounded. Surrender now and maybe you can make a deal." Volkov laughed again, that same cold sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. "You still don't understand who you're dealing with. I've escaped from situations much worse than this." The heavy-set man had worked his way around to Marcus's flank and was raising his weapon when the light suddenly came back on. Agent Chen's voice boomed through a bullhorn from the hallway. "Marcus Williams, this is Agent Chen. We know you're in there. Stay down and identify yourself when we breach the door." Marcus realized that this was his moment. "I'm Marcus Williams, former Army intelligence, current FBI consultant," he shouted, loud enough for everyone in the room and hallway to hear. "I'm armed and taking cover behind the central table, 3 hostile subjects remaining in the room." Volkov's eyes widened with understanding and rage. "Army intelligence, I should have known. You're one of those special operations boys, aren't you? The kind they send in when governments need problems to disappear quietly." She was partially correct, but Marcus had never spoken publicly about his most classified assignments. During his military service, he had been part of an elite unit that conducted deep cover operations against international criminal organizations and terrorist networks. His specialty had been infiltration and intelligence gathering, often spending months or even years embedded with targets before gathering enough evidence to bring them down. The FBI had recruited him after his military service specifically because of these skills and his security clearance. His job as a doorman at the Meridian Tower hadn't been coincidence. He had been placed there 6 months ago as part of the initial surveillance of Blackstone's operations. "That's right," Marcus said, allowing his true identity to emerge fully for the first time since the investigation began. "And I've been watching you and your network for longer than you think. Every meeting, every transaction, every criminal associate. We have it all documented." The sound of the door being breached filled the room with noise and smoke. FBI agents poured through the opening, their weapons trained and tactical lights cutting through the dim emergency lighting. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. Get on the ground now." The heavy-set man immediately complied, throwing his gun aside and dropping to his knees with his hands raised. The disarmed man had remained on the floor throughout the confrontation, clearly wanting no part in a shootout with federal agents, but Volkov wasn't finished. With the speed and precision of a professional assassin, she fired 3 shots at the advancing agents while moving toward what Marcus now realized was a hidden panel in the far wall. She had planned an escape route all along. Agent Chen and her team returned fire, but Volkov had already disappeared through the concealed opening. Marcus could hear her footsteps echoing through what sounded like a narrow tunnel or maintenance corridor. "She's escaping through a hidden passage," Marcus shouted to Agent Chen. "Southwest wall, behind the server equipment." Agent Thompson appeared, in the doorway, breathing heavily from the tactical breach. "Marcus, are you injured?" "I'm fine," Marcus replied, rising from behind the table with his hands visible. "But Volkov is getting away, and she knows details about criminal networks across multiple countries. If she escapes, she'll disappear forever and rebuild somewhere else." Agent Chen was already coordinating with her team to pursue Volkov through the hidden passage, but Marcus knew from his military experience that professional criminals like her always had multiple escape routes planned. By the time the FBI navigated her tunnel system, she would likely be long gone. As paramedics arrived to examine Blackstone's body and the crime scene team began documenting evidence, Marcus finally had a moment to process what had happened. His cover as a simple doorman was permanently blown, but the investigation had uncovered far more than anyone had expected. The computer servers contained detailed records of money laundering operations involving over $200 million. The filing cabinets held documentation of real estate fraud, human trafficking routes, and connections to criminal organizations in 12 different countries. Most importantly, they had found evidence linking several corrupt government officials to Blackstone's network. Patricia Holmes arrived at the building an hour later, accompanied by the building's board of directors and several very confused residents, who had been awakened by the commotion. When she saw Marcus talking with FBI agents, still wearing his doorman uniform but now clearly revealed as a federal operative, her expression was a mixture of shock and understanding. "So you were never really just a doorman," she said when the agents allowed her to approach. Marcus smiled sadly. "I was always really a doorman, Patricia. That wasn't fake. I genuinely cared about this job and the people in this building. The difference is that I was also something else at the same time." Over the next several hours, as the FBI processed the crime scene and interviewed witnesses, the full scope of Marcus's background became clear to the building's residents. He had served with distinction in Army intelligence, had been decorated for his service in overseas operations, and had been working undercover for months to protect them from criminals they never knew existed in their own building. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from 4B who had always been kind to Marcus, approached him as he was giving his final statement to Agent Chen. "I knew there was something special about you," she said, patting his arm gently. "The way you carried yourself, the way you noticed everything. You had the bearing of someone who had seen the world and understood how dangerous it could be." 3 days later, Marcus stood in Patricia's office, officially resigning from his position as doorman. The FBI had offered him a permanent position as a special agent, and his cover at the building was no longer viable anyway. "The residents are going to miss you," Patricia said. "You were more than just an employee here. You were someone they trusted, someone who made them feel safe." Marcus looked out the window at the busy Manhattan street where he had stood guard for so many months. They were safe, even when they didn't know they were in danger. That's what matters. As news of the investigation broke in the media, the story of the racist attack on a doorman who turned out to be an undercover federal agent captured national attention. Blackstone's pattern of discrimination and threats had backfired in the most spectacular way possible, revealing not only his own criminal activities, but exposing an international network of money laundering and human trafficking. Katerina Volkov was eventually captured 3 weeks later at a private airfield in New Jersey, attempting to board a plane to a country without extradition treaties. The evidence Marcus had gathered in the sub-basement proved crucial in building cases against dozens of criminals across multiple jurisdictions. Marcus visited his grandmother Dorothy at the nursing home in Brooklyn, finally able to tell her the full truth about his work and why he had chosen a job that seemed beneath his education and abilities. "I always knew you were fighting the good fight," she said, holding his hand with pride shining in her eyes. "It doesn't matter what uniform you wear or what job title you have. What matters is that you use your gifts to protect people who can't protect themselves." 6 months later, as Special Agent Marcus Williams of the FBI, he reflected on how a simple act of racism had inadvertently brought down one of the largest criminal networks operating in New York City. Blackstone's hatred and prejudice had blinded him to the truth about the man he was targeting, and that blindness had ultimately led to his downfall and death. The residents of the Meridian Tower got a new doorman, But they never forgot the one who had risked his life to keep them safe while they slept, never knowing that their building had been home to dangerous criminals who saw them as nothing more than convenient cover for illegal operations.